I want to get a full game loop working as soon as possible. My goal is to have that done in either episode 3 or maybe episode 4, and it is not necessarily because I want to start designing levels or add some gameplay features, but rather because I want to finish up as many core systems as I can before I dive into making actual game content. And a core system in this case would be basic rendering, which I have, basic scripting, which I also have, a resource management system that includes loading and unloading texture files, script files, entity files, or entire levels, which I don't have. And last but not least, a networking system, because I don't want to wait too long starting with the networking, because the later I do that, the more difficult it's going to be to implement. Because multiplayer is something that needs to be kept in mind from day one. If you've been working on a game for 1 or 2 years and you try to squeeze it in afterwards, you might just need to rewrite your whole game logic, which I definitely do not want to have to do. But one step at a time. For this episode I wanted to add a health system, as well as the concept of teams. I started out by creating a simple health component that stores your maximum as well as your current health. And I also created a health system. The only thing that the health system does is it listens to damage events, healing events, and if an entity dies, he sends out a death event. I also put together a quick health bar renderer where each health bar is rendered using 2 rectangles, where the top rectangle scales depending on your current health. Great, we have the concept of health, now we need something to hurt us. I quickly put together a placeholder sprite for the turrets, as well as creating the blueprints. A turret consists of a transform, texture, script, and a physics component. The collider will be set as a non-solid trigger, and whenever something enters that trigger zone, we will make that our current target and we will fire a projectile towards that direction. The projectiles consist of a transform, physics component, and a texture. And upon creating them, we listen to the collision enter event, and if we hit something that has a health component, then we damage it. And it works! But right now this turret is of course attacking the player. If something walks into range, it will just shoot. It doesn't matter if it's the player or an enemy, so I created a team component that for now only holds a team name, as well as adding the functionality to compare teams and scripts. So I put together a quick placeholder enemy, and the only thing he does is move to the right. And I placed him in a separate team from the turret and the player. And as you can see now, the turret ignores the player, but he will attack the enemy. Now at the end of the video I will work on some UI, so I want some kind of score to track. So I made a coin entity that the enemy will spawn when it dies, and with this I extended the physics component with an add impulse function to give them a bit of a slide when they spawn, and it turned out great. Something I cannot do right now is to draw any kind of text to the screen. These processes can be quite in-depth, but as a first iteration I decided to just go with a simple sprite font implementation. How it will work is that it will use a sprite sheet that contains all different symbols we will need. We also have a file with info about each symbol's location in that sprite sheet. So if we give it a piece of text to render, it goes through the string letter by letter and draws the symbol as different sprites. And to generate these files I am using a software called Hyro. So I created a struct that would hold the information for each symbol, and after all the data is loaded, I added a drawString function in the sprite patcher and we now have text. And back in the game project I added another camera that doesn't move, and all that we will use it for is to render the UI. And here we are looking at text rendered both in world space and screen space. The last thing I added was support for rendering from Lua scripts. I didn't want anything complicated, just the ability to quickly put together some user interface, because once again, doing stuff like this in Lua is much faster compared to doing it in C++. So here I am setting up a basic UI displaying a coin icon and the amount that the player have equipped. I listen for an event that gets fired when a coin is picked up, and I use that to update the text to the current value. And just for fun I also decided to add the ability to buy and place turrets. So if the player presses 1 on his keyboard, he will go into placing mode. A placement guide is shown, and if you can't afford a turret, it will be tinted red. Otherwise, when you click, you will place down a turret and lose on currency. In the end, I was really happy with how the rendering worked out. It's gonna be super useful, especially for prototyping. And unfortunately, that is all I have for this time. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. See you next time!